Hey, this is Andrew. We're here for another group training session, and we want to talk about how to structure your group. There's people who really love structure and they live and die by it, and other people who would rather have things just kind of flow here and there and have no real structure. So, Peter, how do you structure your group so that it accommodates everyone?
I think there's an importance to understanding the difference between balance and harmony. And I make that distinction because of this. Balance says everything's equal, and not everything in your group is equal, but harmony says knowing all the tensions, knowing all the differences, knowing that some people are super structured and other people are very free-flowing. Harmony helps me understand, hey, if I structure my group, how can I have harmony? And so I think that that's really important for us to understand. I grew up in a home, my mom's maiden name's Pottstown, that's Italian. And Italians, if you say, hey, the meal starts at 4, that probably means it really starts at 6. And so I've grown up having structure because I needed that, knowing what my family grew up with. And just as you have these conversations, it's about setting expectations and realizing that the way you grew up, the way that you operated, isn't the same as everyone else. So when we talk about structuring a group, let's talk about the individual group meeting. So I want to start first with as people come through the front door of someone's house. Whether you host it or ask someone else to host, I think it's really important up front to let people know simple things like, hey, know where to park. I want you to park on the street as opposed to the driveway, to make sure that they know, hey, shoes on, shoes off. Yep. And if you start that early on, I think that that really helps people feel comfortable because they know how to be helpful and they know the rules. On top of that, when people first come in, I like to say it's about 10 to 15 minutes of fellowship time. Now, there's some groups that they do this so well that they overdo that time, and that ends up becoming the group time, and we'll talk about a little bit about that later. But there's other groups that you actually need to work to have some good conversation. Ask about how the week's going, maybe what they're reading. But I think an important element to that fellowship time is actually food. And it's not just because we want to feed people and make sure they're nourished. That's really important. But when I have food or a drink in my hand, there's something about that that's comforting. And my wife's a mental health therapist, and she lets me know that every single time, that when people have some type of purpose or something in their hand, it just releases a little bit of tension. So think about that time. And also, as we've talked about before, that's part of delegating to your group. There might be someone in your group that they love organizing or they love, doing the food and the drinks. They can use that time to be a part of that. Or if you're switching houses or homes or locations, that can be something that you kind of delegate on to the people that are hosting. The next part you're going to transition to is into the discussion. So fellowship time, I just want to say for a lot of groups, including my own, it's difficult to move to there.
Definitely.
So one strategy I'd really encourage you to take on is just to say, hey, in 3 minutes, we're going to transition to the discussion. And so the reason I do that is that allows people time to transition. There's some people that they get up right away. There's other people that it takes them longer. But after you say that, I think you as a leader have to physically go into the room or go to the space. You have to model what you want everyone else to do. And so it's really important to do that and to say that, hey, we're going to start, if we arrive at our group at 7, we start at 7:15. So at 7:12, hey, we're heading over. And that helps your non-structured people too, because it's not right away. On top of that, you're making a transition from fun, giddiness, and you're about to read a passage. I think this is where an icebreaker is important. So sometimes an icebreaker has to do with, the passage or the topic of that night. Other times icebreakers are just discussion starters. This is where you as a leader have to use wisdom. So when you use wisdom for your icebreaker, what you're doing is this. If my group has enough fellowship and they can just go right into talking, go ahead and do that. But if my group needs to have a start, that's good too. So you have an icebreaker, but I would also consider praying beyond that icebreaker. Prayer kind of gets people spiritually ready. After you pray, I love starting by reading the passage. And you can read it silently, you can read it out loud, depending on what the topic is. But that again gets people into the discussion, and you're allowing the observations of the passage to come out. Sometimes there's videos in there too, and I think those are helpful, especially for introverts to kind of get their thoughts ready. But again, as we've said in previous videos, what you do before the group to prep for the conversation is actually prepping the other people to discuss. So, emailing the group guide, letting people know what they're talking about, giving them a preview to that. And as you're going in the discussion, it's making sure too that you have a clear end time. So whether you spend anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour in that discussion, it's saying, hey, we will cut off discussion at this point. And then to close the night as part of a structure is prayer time. Now you have the option, you can do prayer, everyone together. What I love to encourage groups to do is to split into smaller groups. So the small group that I'm a part of, we actually split by gender. And so the men go in one room, the women go into another room. What this allows is for us to actually get into heartfelt relationship prayer requests. Sometimes it's not easy to share in a group of 10 to 12 everything that's happening. So use that as a prayer time. And the most important thing about all of this when it comes to structure, you start at the same time and you end at the same time. So the fellowship time, it runs from 7 to 7:15. And if you say, hey, our group is ending at 8:30, we end at 8:30. Now the thing is, depending on the host, it's okay to stay a little bit longer afterwards. And even the host has to be clear, hey, we end at 8:30, my kids need to go to bed, y'all need to be out of the house by 9. That's important. Or even, I have to get up early to work tomorrow. People just need to know. And part of the structure is just letting people know what to expect and coming more into a rhythm. And lastly, what I'd say, if you explain the structure, you're setting expectations so that if the structure is broken in harmful ways, if you're not getting started on time or if you're ending too late, it allows you to come back because everybody has heard what the structure is in the agreement.
So I think I love all the things that you said, Peter. Thanks so much for sharing that, and hopefully that helps you learn to structure your group better.